Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore Iowa stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we're going to explore some of the work done to help people with substance use disorder and mental health challenges. Faced with the ravages of an opioid epidemic, recurrent surges of methamphetamine abuse, both the people of Iowa and those working to help them sometimes face a daunting task. Our guests today are dedicated to helping meet the needs of Iowans facing these traumas and stressors. Let's meet our guests from the Iowa Department of Public Health, Jennifer Robertson Hill and Monica Wilkie Brown. Jennifer, let's start with you. Give us a little bit about yourself and why you're here today.
Thanks, Peter. Hello, all. I'm Jennifer Robertson Hill. I'm a project director at the Iowa Department of Public Health. I work primarily with discretionary grants that are funded from our federal counterpart, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. I've been at the department for about 6 years, and before that, I served as a mental health and substance use disorder treatment counselor in Iowa.
And Monica?
Yeah, I'm Monica Wilkie Brown, and I'm also a project director at the department's Bureau of Substance Abuse. And mostly what we do as project directors is take grants from the federal funder and give those funds out to the local treatment and prevention providers in Iowa so that they can provide services to Iowans.
Now, one thing that we've seen a change, a sort of a great humanistic change is that, and I'll let you start out, Jennifer, with where you're coming from on your projects, is that they're really getting down to community level and the idea of bringing services to people that need help, reducing red tape and getting these things out front so people don't carry that stigma about government making it too slow or hard to get services. This is really changing dramatically. Tell us about how you approach that.
Sure. So as Monica mentioned, what we do is we really take that funding from our federal counterparts and get it out directly into the treatment and prevention organizations in Iowa. The goal of doing so is that, for people like Monica and I, we kind of facilitate that red tape and do the things that we need to do on our part so that people who are in those organizations can provide those services. So the first, one of the grants that I lead and do that for is called the Emergency COVID-19 Response Projects. And so those are two different funding awards that have come down from SAMHSA, and those provide directly to those organizations to pay for substance use disorder treatment and mental health disorder treatment, as well as recovery support services, which are a set of services that are exactly as they sound. They're trying to support individuals in recovery from either substance use or mental health.
And Monica, what are some of the things that you bring to the table from a person watching this that's out there maybe experiencing some trauma, lost about what help they might get? What are some of the contact points that you would see?
I think one of the biggest misperceptions about the services that are available through grants is that you have to be really poor in order to get them, or that, they're super slow or not as good. And those things really aren't the case anymore. There are sometimes some income guidance or limitations, but most of our grants anymore have some level of service that's available to almost anyone. And we do a lot in the opioid focus space to try and make sure that people understand what's going on in the state and also have access to both treatment services as well as those recovery supports and preventative informational services that they might not know that they can get without cost.
And you also provide links to some real practical services that people can use to connect with the system. Was one of you want to address that and talk about some of the things that you might specifically help people with?
Sure. So when people are looking for more information, for example, or want to know what they can do as kind of a general community member, there are ways that people can get a hold of naloxone, which is an opioid overdose reversal medication. And they can do that just by going to local pharmacies and asking if they participate in the free naloxone program. And at that point, they just fill out a super short form and they get free naloxone given to them. Then they're in the position to be able to help someone who might have an opioid overdose. And that can happen to people who aren't necessarily using opioids in a risky way, but maybe have medication in their household and either take too much by accident, or a child gets a hold of it and accidentally takes medication. But also then for people who are struggling with the misuse or disordered use of an opioid and are at higher risk for an opioid overdose, they can also be, use that naloxone to help reverse an overdose so that they can have another chance to get into recovery.
I'd also like to talk about some of the other sort of unique services that you bridge a gap to in the community, things that people might not expect, practical things that on an everyday level can be a real challenge. But we're going to take a short break first, and then we'll come back and continue our conversation with Jennifer and Monica. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzz and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
While a lot is changing in our world, at MediaCom, our focus remains the same, making sure you have the fastest, most reliable connection possible. During this critical time, we know your needs are changing. You may be working or learning from home, relying on telemedicine, or finding new ways to keep everyone entertained. If you need more speed, call or go online, and MediaCom will double your speed immediately for as low as $10 more a month for 1 year. Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening, our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're talking with Jennifer and Monica, directors of public health projects that help Iowans cope with substance use disorder, mental health challenges, and some practical day-to-day challenges that might surprise you. Jennifer, let's start with you. Give us a little bit of an idea of some of the interesting things these grants provide for people.
Sure. So the emergency COVID-19 response grants were really just designed for all Iowans. So for anyone who is finding themselves in situations where they're experiencing behavioral health concerns and have been impacted by COVID-19. So there's really not some super strict eligibility criteria to get into these grants. It's just as it sounds, is experiencing behavioral health concerns and also identifying an impact of COVID-19, which I think everyone has been impacted in some way or another by COVID-19 at this point. So some of the services in addition to the mental health and substance use disorder that I already mentioned was gas cards, helping people to get to and from treatment, helping to pay for copays, because sometimes those copays really do add up if you're seeing a provider every week. Other things like bus passes, and for individuals, who have like high deductibles, so they have insurance, a lot of times that's a concern, is that they know that it would take them a long time to reach their deductible before insurance would kick in. We help to pay directly for services as well, so that the deductible isn't a barrier or a challenge. And then Monica also has in her specific grants, which she could talk about other services that are paid for as well.
Monica.
Yeah, and so with the state opioid response grant, we were able to offer a slightly larger menu of recovery supports, including things like incentives for attending treatment especially when people either with opioid or with a stimulant use disorder initially start into recovery. It's not always the most pleasant experience. And so when we're able to provide small incentives, like a $15 gift card to, Walmart or the gas station or somewhere, if they attend, a certain number of their appointments in a row, then they can get that incentive. It's a very limited part of the program, but it does help with that initial difficulty in making it to your treatment appointments or your support groups and the things that you really need to do to get more stable in your recovery. We also provide things like educational support or wellness support. So we know that recovery is really a whole person situation. And when people are able to get a gym membership, for example, or have some support for education about their recovery, that can really help them to maintain that and keep growing in their recovery.
What do you hear in terms of feedback from the communities? Is it getting, is this problem growing that these grants are addressing? Is this something that we feel we still have to get a grasp on because it's not really trending down, it's trending up?
Yeah, Jenny can talk about the impact of COVID-19 on, mental and behavioral health, but we haven't seen any improvements in the opioid space because of the isolation and, the stress that is happening both on the economic and job spaces for people during the pandemic, as well as, just all the regular life stresses that used to be plenty, right? But now that's just in addition to all these changes with COVID. And so we haven't seen a lot of improvements with the statistics, but we are looking at trying to make these supports available to help.
Yeah, it's sort of like having a big truck, and when you hit the brakes, you don't stop right away, or a train. That things take a while. And I don't know if this is something that's been atop your mind, but as I was watching the news today online, I noticed a report that the number of opioid deaths in the age group 55 and older has gone up. And your programs do address not just the younger population, but the older population that may be just, like my neighbors and people we know, and grandma, grandpa, Uncle Bill, or whatever.
Yeah, with opioids, it's been challenging just because it does address the entire lifespan. And people often end up using opioids for, medical reasons. And we know that as people age, they have more and more medical interventions and opportunities then to use pain relief medications, but also to have that risk of getting hooked on them.
Well, we're going to take another short break and continue the conversation. I can see that Jennifer has something she wanted to add to this, so we'll get to you right after the break. When we come back, we're going to have a chance to look at some of the problem-solving strategies that are working for Iowans. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At MediaCom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared. And you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here. Wait. What? I can't drive. Why? My. Oh.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Jennifer and Monica about programs that can help you find your way through some tough times. And another interesting aspect of all this is that for many of us, we haven't always made government and help synonymous. But yet so much is changing to put what's happening in public health into a framework that can really help a lot of people. Jennifer, you had some points you wanted to make about that.
Yeah, so I think historically, substance use and mental health hasn't always been looked at in a favorable context. It's oftentimes considered an invisible disease of sorts, and that's really what our jobs is like trying to raise awareness, trying to get people engaged in services, and helping the public see that this is as essential to health as is any other health condition. So we really do a lot of our work in terms of getting into new environments and helping people address their substance use and mental health earlier rather than waiting until something is a severe, disorder. So, and Monica could talk a bit about that. She has funding that's specific going out to different environments.
Yeah, so we have some of the opioid response funds that are actually pointed to preventative screenings and referrals. So it's an acronym called SBIRT that stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. And we've had amazing success really with seeing the number of screenings happening at hospitals and, even in like specialized clinic areas such as prenatal services to help make sure that people are recognizing that if they're using at a risky level, they can dial that back before it gets to the point where it's a full-blown addiction and they need treatment. And so that is a really nice way to use these funds and see the impact that we can have in a preventative space in order to try and head things off earlier and avoid some of those problems that come down the line.
So what's changed so much? What would you say about these programs has changed over the years that would inspire, the average person to want to connect? And how would they connect? Would they get online? Would they look at a community resource?
Yeah, so we have a lot of resources on yourlifeiowa.org. So that is a place that's kind of a landing spot for things related to substance use disorders. Now there's a lot on mental health, suicide, problem gambling. And when people are looking for resources, maybe they want to put a poster up in their library. They can go to the media center there and download a poster and print it out on their printer if they want to, and put up a poster just to kind of help the community know that like we are all in this together, right? And we need to help each other out and be supportive of families that are struggling, individuals that are struggling, and really do what we can to make these times a little easier.
Now, do people need to get in touch with local resources, or can they use an online connection to public health to get these resources?
I could jump in. So yourlifeiowa.org, what Monica mentioned, is not just a website, as she mentioned, for resources and such, but there is actually a treatment locator on that website, so yourlifeiowa.org, and that helps people to locate. You can go by county, you can go by zip code, and it helps you to locate where you are and what the closest treatment programs are and their contact information. And then there's also a phone number, a chat for text, and email as well. So there's a crisis intervention line that's run as a part of the Your Life Iowa website so that people could reach out within seconds if they want to just talk to somebody rather than use the treatment locator.
Well, we'll put some of those contact points in the credits for the show so people can find out where to go while they're watching. That would be great. All right, let me ask you a question, Monica. What do you find inspiring from the work you do? What really gets you? I mean, what are some of the stories that say, God, I'm really proud to be a part of this?
There's a lot, but really the opportunity to help people and help others who are doing, the everyday hard work of helping people. And so making the funds available so that they can hire more staff, or making sure that, the yourlifeiowa.org site has information on it that's relevant to not only, educated adults, but also teens, and making sure that we know what's going on when people are in crisis so that they can reach out and get the help they need.
That's really cool. And Jennifer, for you?
So for years, I was providing direct services, and this question was a lot different of an answer. I really enjoyed helping people, and that was super hard moving into more of an administrative role. But I will say that we routinely collect success stories and just different perspectives on like how our services impact people. And like one recently I got was from a more kind of a populated county here in Iowa, and there was an individual who had a $6,000 deductible before they, would their insurance would kick in and help pay for services. And so one of our grants helped to fund that person's treatment, and they were receiving medication assisted treatment as well as mental health and substance use disorder. So all of those services, I mean, while they would have totaled a lot, that would have been a huge barrier. And they were having a new baby, and it was like, I can't imagine like having a need like that and then just money being a reason why you don't get help. So that's where I'm at now, is I love to see those stories where we could help people fill the gaps, I guess.
Well, let's take a little break and talk some more about some of those theories and gaps that you can fill. And we'll invite Jennifer and Monica to share some final comments and advice. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
Devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening. Our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Whether it's advice on managing your anxiety or tools to help you stay grounded, Coping-19 provides a range of resources and self-care tips to help you cope with this pandemic. We can help. Find the resources that work best for you at coping-19.org.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and today we're talking about programs that are reaching out to help Iowans deal with the problems related to substance use disorder, mental health, and other challenges that can accompany traumatic events. Let's hear what advice Jennifer and Monica have to share. Jennifer, starting with you, you had some great points to make during the break. Why don't you share that with our guests?
Sure. So we get lots of questions about how to help family members or close friends who are experiencing, problems with substance use or mental health. And as, we've mentioned, there are those resources on Your Life Iowa, but also just having honest conversations about how, what your concerns are and why you have those concerns. A lot of times people are struggling with things internally and they're just looking for someone to talk to. So sometimes they need someone to make it okay to say that we could have these feelings. And so I just encourage everyone to have honest conversations with those family members and at least open the dialogue.
Yeah, we've seen something in the national media where, if we think about it today, there's more talk about mental health than there ever has been. There's been stigma and taboo. But the other side of the coin is, it's one thing to be a famous football player or a multimillionaire and get on TV and all of a sudden it's your cause célèbre and you're a hero. But the average person that's dealing with these problems does not feel like a hero if they have coworkers, people at church they know, their neighbors. They're not going to get out in the street corner and shout out, hey, I have this problem and I did this. So somewhere there has to be a fundamental bridge to the common man, to the average person. And it seems like what you guys are doing has a lot to do with that.
Well, and that's an opportunity, that people have, is to really start having those conversations and talking to reduce the stigma that's out there, because we know that stigma is one of the reasons that people don't get treatment. They're afraid of what their neighbors or their coworkers or their boss will think. And that just makes things worse a lot of times, right? So if we can talk about the fact that this is hard and it's real and it's something that a lot of people are going through, then that helps to normalize a little bit. And that's part of why we have things like the screenings in healthcare, because it is a medical issue. And people a lot of times think it's just, bad decisions or, that's a bad family or a bad person. And that's not the case at all. There are a lot of really good people who are really struggling because this is basically a chronic brain disease. And when we can wrap our heads around that and understand that there are, science-based ways to make it better, and that recovery does work, and if we get help, that can really turn someone's life around, that's really helpful. And if we can be supportive of our friends and neighbors, when someone gets really sick with, cancer or something, a lot of times people will bring food or, offer support. And when someone goes into treatment for addiction, they don't often do those things, right? So if we can be those people in our communities that support people who are struggling, that can make a huge difference.
Let me ask you, Jennifer, sort of a fundamentally imprecise question. Even if you don't have a pretty smile, if you smile, you'll feel better. Even if you don't have the greatest voice, if you sing, you'll feel better, and maybe even make people around you feel better too. Now, we talk about these conversations. Is it fair to say that even if you don't know what you're talking about, just the effort to talk about it is so powerful?
I think so. I mean, I think that, at least in my experience, obviously a lot of us who get into this field, we get into this field for a reason because we know people who've been there. And every time I've had a conversation with someone, as uncomfortable as it starts, every single time it ends with a positive feeling on both both parts. It might not be the positive, like, oh, I'm going to get help feeling. Maybe that's not something, but at least somebody knows that you care enough to ask or to talk about it. And, sometimes it has been uncomfortable and it's led to some conflict type situations, but in the end, it brings it up and then eventually it gets to a better place, so I can't say for everybody that they're always receptive to it, but I definitely, in my experience, if you go at it in a non-judgmental way, I think it's just showing that you care.
That's a great point to end the show on, and I thank you so much for joining us today and helping bring this sort of smile or song to people's lives when it comes to these challenges with mental health and substance use disorder. Thank you all for joining us today. Check out our website, ahealthyiowa.org, for more information, and keep your eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore Iowa stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. On MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.